Harimi, harimi, al tirai, harimi, al tirai. Imri le'arei Yehuda, hine Elokeichem. Harimi, harimi, al tirai.
Okay, let's start. Page 168 in the bilingual edition, which is in the middle of Siman Ayin Ches, if you happen to have a Rabbi Friedlander edition, which I forgot mine at home. So, and for those who don't have a book, maybe we should get some books for people next time. If there's interest, if those want to follow along, you can just listen. So we've been talking about the body and the soul for a while. We've also been talking about the different stages of human history. And now, we've been also talking about Hester Panim and Gilei Panim, which is that really the source of evil and the source of physicality, which is, we can call it evil, but maybe mundane, we could use the word. The source of that is Hester Panim, where Hashem Ki'ilu hides himself, and he creates it through that method. We didn't really talk about the mechanics of that. That's talked about more in Derech Hashem, exactly how that the Hester Panim, it's a more of an indirect creation, but it's still coming about through Hashem hiding himself. And then we talked about how the neshama, the soul, and spiritual creations are really from Hashem's direct divine light. And human beings, we are a composite of a body and the soul. And we're going to talk more about that now. So page 168 in the edition that we're using. Do you have the old translation? I've been looking for it, I can't find it. The old Daas Tevunos translation. My Yeshiva looked it over, edited it before. Yeah. I was looking for the old Feldheim translation, but I can only find the new one now. Okay. Mashihu b'hanhaga, hu b'briya. Just the way Hashem directs the operation of the world is also how he created the world. The different creations. So b'hanhaga means that there's certain times in human history where Hashem is hiding himself. We have the Purpse story now in Galus. We don't see Hashem's glory. We don't see Hashem directly interfering with the world. It's not as clear as if he were splitting the sea. Obviously Hashem is interacting with the world constantly, but we have to look for it. In the same way he interacts with human events, so too that's how he created creation, with these two ideas of Hester Panim and Gilei Panim. Ki anivraim hagasim v'ha'achurim, the coarse and the, we'll call it cloudy creations, the lower level of creations, lo nivru ela behester panim, they were only created through Hester Panim, of this idea of Hashem hiding himself. Ki lo heir lahem panei kacho, Hashem did not give his light for these creations directly. V'aruchaniyim hanichbadim beruyim beha'aras panim, and the spiritual creations, which are very lofty and very honored, they were created with Hashem's direct light, like we just mentioned. And based on these principles, Hashem connected the body and the soul. We mentioned last week that, and then we say at Asher Yatsu, the blessing, every time after we go to the bathroom, we say Umafli Lasos. It's a pella, it's a wonderment that Hashem made us like this. And the Ramah writes, the reason that it's a wonderment that Hashem made us like this is that we have two opposites. We have a soul and we have a body that Hashem cleaved together, which really the opposite. The body was created through Hester Panim, and the soul, which we have, the part of our soul which wants to connect to Hashem and be involved in holy acts, was connected to this body, which was created from Ha'aras Panim. Shehaguf in Yono B'chal Darchayim B'Hester Panim Nimshachim Ubayim. The body in all of its aspects has to do with Hester Panim. V'Haneshama B'chal Inyana, and the soul in all of its aspects B'Ha'aras Panim, with Hashem's revelation of His presence, His divine light. V'Hinei Adam Hu Atzmo Hamatakin V'Nitkan. A person himself is the one who rectifies and becomes rectified. He makes perfection in the world and he becomes perfected. How? When a person serves Hashem, he rectifies the world in his service. It says in the pasuk, Va'asisem osam, you shall do them, referring to the mitzvahs. Va'asisem atem ksiv, and you read it, or it's written that you shall make yourselves. So Shadarshu Chazal, that the rabbis learn out of that pasuk, meaning that when you do the mitzvos, it could also, the way it's written is that you will make for yourselves, because when you do a mitzvah, you are actually rectifying yourself, your soul, your being, Right? When we do mitzvahs, it's not just like Hashem gives us a check mark upstairs, and after 120 we get there and said, all right, you've done 1,642,000 mitzvahs in your life, and you did 980,000 averos, you go into Gan Eden. That's not how it works. When we do a mitzvah, we are actually rectifying ourselves and the spiritual worlds, and we are actually making a real spiritual reality in ourselves and the worlds, and we are fixing ourselves. We are making ourselves into more spiritual creations, as he's going to say soon. And when we do a mitzvah, we have the ability to overcome the physicality and its ways. If a person goes after his eyes and the way of his physical heart, so if a person goes after his body, his physical desires, he goes after his eyes, he sees something he wants to do that he shouldn't be doing, not only will the soul not serve its purpose, we mentioned last time, a few times ago, the purpose of the soul is actually to purify the body. And we said that the reason that doesn't totally happen now, it happens to some degree now, because Hashem made it that there's a boundary to the level that the soul can perfect the body, because if the soul was able to exert its full force on the body, our body would turn into a spiritual being. The body wouldn't be able to stand it. So Hashem made, when we're in this world, the soul is kind of trapped. La'asad lavo, after the resurrection of the dead, the soul will be able to have its full power and will totally transform the body into a spiritual being. And we said that is the purpose of the soul. The purpose of the soul is to purify the body. So the Ramchal is writing that if a person goes after his physical desires, not only is the soul not serving its purpose to purify the body, but on the contrary, the body is going to damage the soul or darken the soul. It's going to cause a hefsid, a nezek, damage, great damage, and cause it to be totally absorbed in darkness. So the opposite. If a person overcomes his Yetzer Hara, the Asar ben Darchei Hevel, and he goes away from the path of emptiness, and goes in the ways of Torah and mitzvos, then his soul will overpower the body, and then the soul will do what it's supposed to and purify the body. I just want to mention, parenthetically, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says there's really two parts of the Yetzer Hara, parts of the evil inclination. We have a body, but there's also a spiritual force, meaning that part of the Yetzer Hara is that we have a body, so we have normal bodily desires. We want to eat. So included in that, if you're very hungry, you want to eat something non-kosher. We have a desire for, other physical things that we're not supposed to be doing. That just comes from having a body, right? Beings with bodies have these desires. There's an additional force called Tumah or Zuama. That's an actual a negative spiritual force, or the Satan, however you want to call it, that actually pushes us even more to do evil. So we have these two forces that are trying to get us to do evil. Just the fact that we have a physical body that we share with animals, and then we have this additional Zuama that we got after the sin of Adam, right? The Zuama, this Tumah, used to be external, that used to be in the snake, and then after the sin that became internal. So we have these two parts. V'ata, tira shivu shel olam. Go see the happenings of the world. Uma ben darim kadmain l'darim basrain. See the difference between the earlier generations and the latter generations. Kiba emes hasama libo ha'inyin. If a person thinks about it, asher nasan alukim la'anas bo. Yisma ma'or al chayfetz liros b'nei adam ratzav v'shov. It's really bewildering to see people running back and forth. Yom v'layla lo yishbosu, day and night, and they don't rest. Ish l'darko nilim v'yefim. To see these people weary and exhausted. What are they working so hard for? To eat and drink, to get food and water, food and drink. Al hevel avalam, nothingness, shein klum, that's worthless. Al olam shel tosh ben lailo haya, a world of nothingness. Hayom kana machar bekever. Today people are alive, and tomorrow they are going to be in the ground, in a coffin. He's saying that people spend their whole lives amassing wealth, pleasure, and they die. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. This is I understand as a kid that people don't really think about this, but as they get older, don't they see that you're not going to be here forever? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's pretty logical. The truth is that people try their best to, ignore this fact. We try to pretend that we're not going to die, and it's what people I think joke around at funerals, and they just joke around at shiva houses. They just don't want to admit that's going to happen to them. But if a person would sit for a second you have to think, is really the purpose of life just amassing wealth and pleasure? Because even before a person dies, you get to a certain age, you don't really enjoy all that so much. Doesn't that's I don't get, like, people who aren't coming to shul Sunday morning, don't they sit and think, I don't know, what's going to happen after all this? You're only here for a certain amount of time. Anyway, but everyone's in shul, so clearly everyone here has already thought of that. Baruch Hashem, we're on the right track. Now, it doesn't mean all or nothing, right? If someone hasn't thought about it, just to think about it a little and to start doing a few mitzvahs, I don't know, maybe people think that, if I'm a good person, whatever that means, then I'll go to heaven, whatever that means. But, if we spent as much time learning the spiritual aspects of life as we do to putting in so much time and effort to be successful in the physical aspects of life, we would be in much better shape. That's why I was thinking also that, people criticize yeshiva education for what they criticize it for, but really the idea of yeshiva education is to teach a human being what he's supposed to be, what he's supposed to be spending his life for. He's supposed to be spending his life to serve Hashem, because the neshama, as we're going to see, the body doesn't last forever, but the soul does. So it makes sense when you're in a young person, you want to educate them to be successful as a servant of God in the aspect of their soul that's much more important than the body. Obviously you teach them that stuff also that they need for the body to make a living and whatever, the basics, but you don't spend years and years and years teaching them how to make as much money as possible. That's not considered a success. That's usually people criticize certain people with the yeshiva education. First of all, it happens to be people with the yeshiva education, many of them are wealthier than the people with the secular education, and they had less of education, had to spend less money for their advanced degrees. But just as an aside, even the people that make less, they're criticizing them. Well, yeshiva people make less, and they have larger families, and they whatever. But maybe that's not the goal in life. Maybe the goal in life isn't to make the most money, but maybe it's more important to be a servant of Hashem and to do that the best way possible. Just a thought. Depends what your values are. Okay, let's just finish this paragraph. Aval, Misha Yetiv Liras, but someone who is blessed to see, Year of Yav, and understands, Kilo Davar Zanivra Adam. This is not why a person was created. Rather, he was created to be occupied, to understand the glory of his Creator. This is why a person was created and given a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, the ability to think. If you notice, I think my Yeshiva said this, I forgot from who, every animal in creation has exactly what it needs to survive, except for human beings. We have more than we need to survive. Why do we have to have a brain to think, a philosophy to think about why we're here, where we're going? We don't need that to just survive, right? Why do we have a brain that we can understand Daas Tevunos, why Hashem created us? Because that's why a human being was created. We weren't just created like an animal to eat and drink and whatever. We were created to think about Hashem, to study Torah, because Hashem gave every being what they need to survive. That's why we're created, for our minds, to use our minds to, as he's saying, learn about the glory of God, which is done through studying Torah. Not to do a lot of business, so koshar, devar shamabakach, and everything else with nothingness. However, a person who corrupts his deeds, every generation it goes like this. The earlier generations were much closer to wisdom and to knowledge. The latter generations were much further away, and absorbed with the physicality and the natural order of things, with business, which leave nothing of value behind, like we have mentioned earlier. Okay, so let's stop here for the day. But the idea is that we have, what the Ramchal is saying, we have a body and have a soul, and a person has a choice. Does he want to go after his bodily desires or his spiritual desires? And it's a very important choice, because one thing is that it's going to impact the spiritual worlds and also impact the selves. The more a person spends his time in spiritual pursuits, the more that part of him will become stronger, and he'll have less of a desire for physical pursuits. But the more a person is involved with physical pursuits, the less of a desire he'll have for spiritual pursuits. And it's not just like a logical thing. There's a Yetzer Hara we were mentioning, there's a Tumah that tries to get us away from spirituality. So we have to, and it's a struggle. It's a struggle. It's always a struggle. Life is always a struggle. Someone just told me there was I forgot which gadol it was, but the person went to him and says, one of his students said, I have such a strong Yetzer Hara, I don't know how to control it. So he says, don't worry, it gets easier after the first 100 years. Our whole life is a struggle. Ritzi Berkowitz just said that if a person doesn't realize, I said all of life is a struggle, and if a person doesn't realize that, he has bigger problems. But that doesn't mean it's impossible either. It's just a challenge. Life is a challenge because when we go through a struggle, just like when you're lifting weights, to get bigger muscles, you have to lift weights until you're about to get fatigued and you can't lift it anymore. That's how the muscles grow. Same thing in spirituality. We have to challenge ourselves to grow, because if we don't do that, then we'll become stale. And like what's his name said when he was here, that life is like a downwards escalator. If you're not walking up, you're going to be going down. So things are going. No one took Hamantash, and that's super easy.